Here's a question that seems simple until you think about it. What do you call someone who made automobiles affordable to the middle class? A founding father who would rather die than live without liberty? A short story writer who invented the surprise ending and the greatest running back of his generation? You call them Henry. But here's what makes this surname different from every other name in the series. Henry didn't just become a surname, it exploded into dozens of them. If your last name is Harris, or Harrison, or Henderson, or Hendricks, or Hendricks, or Hawkins, you're a Henry. You just don't know it yet. Let's start where the name started. In the forests of ancient Germania, more than 1,000 years before anyone called England home. The original name was Haimirich. It's a compound of two old Germanic elements, Heim, meaning home, Rick, meaning ruler or power. Put them together and you get ruler of the home. This wasn't a humble name. In an era when most people had one name and it described what they looked like or what they did for a living, Haimirich was a statement of ambition. It was a name you gave a son you expected to lead. The Germanic tribes understood something about names that we've largely forgotten. A name wasn't just identification. It was prophecy. It was a declaration of what you hoped your child would become. When the Romans encountered Germanic tribes, they Latinized it to Hendricks. The name appears in church records across medieval Europe, carried by monks and nobles alike. When the Franks built their kingdoms across what's now France and Germany, they called their princes Heinrich. 7 German kings bore this name before the Normans ever set foot on English soil. The Holy Roman Empire saw Heinrich after Heinrich sit on its throne. And then, in 1066, everything changed. When William the Conqueror crossed the English Channel and defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings, he didn't just bring soldiers. He brought language. He brought culture. He brought names. Among them, Henri. The French had taken the Germanic Heinrich and softened it, the way French tends to soften hard consonants. Henri. And that's the version that arrived in England with the Norman aristocracy. But here's what's fascinating about the English. They didn't adopt Henri exactly as the French pronounced it. They couldn't quite manage that French vowel at the end. So they adapted it. In English mouths, Henri became Harry, not as a nickname, as the actual pronunciation. When medieval Englishmen spoke about their kings, they didn't say King Henry. They said King Harry. Shakespeare knew this. That's why he has the chorus in Henry V cry out for Harry, England, and St. George. This matters for what comes next, because when surnames began forming, they formed from how people actually spoke, not from how scribes wrote things down in Latin documents. No name in English history has sat on the throne more often than Henry, 8 times. And here's something most people don't realize. Only 2 of those 8 were actually born as heirs to the throne. The rest seized power through force, cunning, or the messy luck of having everyone ahead of them die. Henry I was William the Conqueror's 4th son. He grabbed the crown when his brother William II died in a hunting accident, which Henry himself may have arranged. He ruled for 35 years and earned a reputation for administrative competence, but his only legitimate son drowned in the White Ship disaster, triggering a civil war. Henry II built an empire stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees, married Eleanor of Aquitaine, and developed English common law. Then he watched his sons rebel against him one by one. He died cursing his children. Henry III became king at 9 years old during a civil war and spent his reign trying to please everyone, while pleasing no one. Henry IV seized the throne from Richard II and spent his reign fighting rebellions. Henry V, the warrior king, led an outnumbered army to impossible victory at Agincourt. Shakespeare would immortalize him. "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers." He died at 35, leaving an infant son. Henry VI inherited the throne as a baby, lost most of France, went mad, and was eventually murdered in the Tower of London. Henry VII ended the Wars of the Roses by defeating Richard III at Bosworth Field and founded the Tudor dynasty. And then there's Henry VIII, the man who wanted a son so badly that he divorced 2 wives, beheaded 2 more, and broke England away from the Catholic Church entirely. In the process, he dissolved the monasteries, doubled the crown's revenue, and fundamentally reshaped English religion, politics, and culture for the next 500 years. All three of his children would become monarchs. None would have children of their own. When the Tudor dynasty ended with Elizabeth I in 1603, Henry VIII's obsession with male heirs had achieved nothing. But his name? His name lived on. Remember, medieval Englishmen pronounced Henry as Harry. So when surnames began forming in the 13th and 14th centuries, when John the blacksmith's son became John Johnson, the sons of men named Henry didn't become Henrysons. They became Harrisons, and Harrises, and Harrys. Think about that for a moment. Harris, the 25th most common surname in America, with over 624,000 people, means son of Harry, which means son of Henry. Harrison, rank 141 with over 181,000 people, same thing. The name proliferated further. Henderson means son of Hendry, the Scottish form. Hendricks and Hendrickson come from the Dutch Hendrick. Hendrix is a variant spelling that became famous when a guitar player from Seattle made it legendary. In Wales, where surnames often began with ape, meaning son of, AP Harry became Parry. AP Henry became Penry. Even Hawkins may trace back to a diminutive form of Harry, Little Hawk, Little Harry. And here's one more. Henson, as in Jim Henson, creator of the Muppets. Son of Hen, son of Henry. If you gathered everyone in America whose surname derives from Henry, all the Harrises and Harrisons and Hendersons and Parrys and Hendrickses and Hensons, you'd have millions of people. The Henry family tree isn't a single branch. It's a forest. Let's talk about Henry itself, the name that kept its original form. According to the 2010 U.S. Census, approximately 171,000 Americans carry the surname Henry. That ranks it 149th in the country. Not enormous by the standards of Smith or Johnson, but substantial. Here's what makes Henry's demographics interesting. About 65% of American Henrys identify as white. About 29% identify as black. That's a significantly higher black population share than the national average. And it points to something specific in American history. The name Henry arrived in the American South early. It appeared in Virginia records as far back as 1651, when one Andrew Henry landed in the colony. As slavery expanded, the name Henry, sometimes given by enslavers, sometimes chosen by freed people after emancipation, became embedded in black American family lineages. Today, Henry ranks among the surnames that bridge American communities. It's a name with roots in English monarchy and French aristocracy that became, over centuries, distinctly American. The highest concentrations? Texas, California, and Florida. But you'll find Henrys in every state. March 23, 1775. Richmond, Virginia. A lawyer named Patrick Henry stood before the Second Virginia Convention. The American colonies were debating what to do about Britain. Some urged caution, negotiation, patience. Patrick Henry had no patience left. He was 38 years old, the son of a Scottish immigrant father and a Virginia mother. He'd failed as a store clerk, failed as a farmer, watched his farmhouse burn down, moved into his father-in-law's tavern. Then he found his calling, the law. And in the courtroom, he discovered he could do something no one else could. He could speak. Not just argue, not just persuade. He could ignite. He had learned from watching evangelical preachers during the Great Awakening, men who spoke not to convince, but to transform. In 1765, just 5 years after passing the bar, Henry stood in the Virginia House of Burgesses and railed against the Stamp Act with such force that other legislators accused him of treason. His response: "If this be treason, make the most of it." Now 10 years later, as war with Britain seemed inevitable, Henry gave the speech that would define him forever. Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? He knew how to build to a climax. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry would serve 5 terms as governor of Virginia. He would help draft the Virginia Declaration of Rights, a document that influenced the U.S. Bill of Rights. He would fight against the Constitution until those first 10 amendments were added. He fathered 17 children across 2 marriages. He turned down appointments from George Washington, Secretary of State, Supreme Court Justice, Ambassador to Spain. He wanted to stay home. He died on June 6, 1799, at his Virginia plantation called Red Hill. He was 63 years old. The surname Henry, ruler of the home, had produced a man who demanded to rule himself, or not at all. Henry Ford was born on a farm near Dearborn, Michigan on July 30, 1863. He was the eldest of 6 children. By the age of 12, he was spending most of his spare time in a machine shop he'd equipped himself. At 15, he built his first steam engine. His father wanted him to take over the farm. Henry wanted to build machines. What fascinated Ford wasn't steam. It was the internal combustion engine, the idea that you could harness controlled explosions to move a carriage without a horse. In 1896, he completed his first automobile, the quadricycle. It was basically a frame with 4 bicycle wheels and a 2-cylinder engine. He built it in a shed behind his house, and when he finished, he realized it was too wide to fit through the door. He had to knock out part of the wall to get it onto the street. He sold that first car to fund a better version. He formed one company, which failed, formed another, which became Cadillac after he left. Finally, in 1903, he got it right. Ford Motor Company was incorporated with $28,000 in cash from 12 investors. Ford owned about a quarter of the stock. In 1908, Ford introduced the Model T. And here's where he changed history. Previous automobiles were luxury items, playthings for the wealthy. Ford wanted a car that farmers and factory workers could afford. He pioneered the moving assembly line. He reduced the time to build a car from 12 hours to 93 minutes. He dropped the price of the Model T from $850 in 1908 to $290 by 1926. In 1914, he did something even more radical. He raised the minimum wage at his factories to $5 a day, more than double the industry standard, and cut the workday from 9 hours to 8. People called him a socialist. People called him a genius. He called it good business. By 1918, half of all cars in America were Model Ts. Henry Ford didn't just build automobiles. He built the American middle class's ability to move freely across a continent. He helped create the suburbs, the highway system, the entire geography of modern American life. He died on April 7, 1947. He was 83 years old. In 1999, Fortune magazine named him the businessman of the century. William Sidney Porter was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, in 1862. His mother died when he was 3. He worked in his uncle's pharmacy, becoming a licensed pharmacist by 19. Moved to Texas, worked on a ranch, became a bank teller, got accused of embezzlement, fled to Honduras. When he learned his wife was dying, he came back and turned himself in. He spent 3 years in the Ohio State Penitentiary. In prison, Porter worked as a pharmacist, and he started writing short stories. He needed a pen name, something to hide his identity as a convicted felon. He chose O. Henry. Why O. Henry? Nobody knows for certain. Maybe it was a guard's name. Maybe it was from a pharmacy reference book. Etienne Ossian Henry, a French pharmacist. Maybe it was a coded reference to the Ohio Penitentiary itself. What matters is what he did with it. After his release in 1901, Porter moved to New York City and wrote prolifically. He published nearly 400 short stories in the next decade. Stories about ordinary people, shopgirls, policemen, drifters, caught in situations where fate pivots on a single unexpected moment. His most famous story, The Gift of the Magi, tells of a young couple so poor that each secretly sells their most precious possession to buy a gift for the other. She sells her beautiful hair to buy a chain for his watch. He sells his watch to buy combs for her hair. The twist at the end. The irony, the recognition that love matters more than logic. That's O. Henry's signature, and that's his legacy. He died in 1910, only 47 years old, but people still leave 187 in coins on his grave in Asheville, North Carolina. The exact amount his character Della had saved at the beginning of The Gift of the Magi. The surprise ending lives on. Derrick Lamar Henry Jr. was born on January 4, 1994, in Yulee, Florida. By the time he finished high school, he had set the national record for career rushing yards, 12,124 yards, breaking a mark that had stood for nearly 60 years. At the University of Alabama, he won the Heisman Trophy in 2015 and broke Herschel Walker's SEC single-season rushing record. In the NFL, he became something else entirely. At 6'3" and 247 pounds, Derrick Henry is built like a linebacker who runs the football. He doesn't juke defenders, he runs through them, and when they try to tackle him, they often fail. In 2020, he rushed for 2,027 yards, only the 8th player in NFL history to break 2,000. He's the only player ever to rush for 2,000 yards at the high school, college, and professional levels. His nickname, King Henry. Because when you carry the ball like royalty, the name fits. Today, playing for the Baltimore Ravens after 8 seasons in Tennessee, Henry continues climbing the all-time rushing lists. He's past Jim Brown, past Tony Dorsett. He's currently 10th all-time in career rushing yards and climbing. He's joined LaDainian Tomlinson as the only players with 10 or more rushing touchdowns in 8 consecutive seasons. At 31 years old, ancient for a running back, he shows no signs of slowing down. The surname that once meant ruler of the home now means something else on Sundays in America. It means good luck stopping him. If your name is Henry, or Harris, or Harrison, or Henderson, or any of the dozens of surnames this name has spawned, here's what you carry. You carry the ambition of ancient Germanic tribes who named their sons for power. You carry the legacy of 8 English kings, for better or worse, some brilliant, some monstrous, all consequential. You carry Patrick Henry's refusal to compromise on liberty. You carry Henry Ford's belief that innovation should serve ordinary people, not just the wealthy. You carry O. Henry's faith that a good story needs a good twist. You carry Derrick Henry's proof that the name still means something on the field. And you carry whatever your own family added to the name. The migrations, the marriages, the choices made under pressure, the moments of courage and the moments of compromise. A surname isn't just etymology, it's not just history. It's a rope connecting you to everyone who carried it before. Here's the final thought. Most surnames in this series are standalone. Smith means blacksmith. Brown means brown. Johnson means son of John. Henry is different. Henry fractured into Harris, and Harrison, and Henderson, and Hendricks, and Harry, and Parry, and Henson, and a dozen more. The name didn't just survive the centuries, it proliferated. And maybe that's fitting. Because Henry, Haimirich, means ruler of the home. And rulers don't just occupy space, they expand it. They build, they multiply their influence. So if your name is Henry, you're not carrying just one surname. You're carrying the root of an entire family of names that spread across the English-speaking world. That's the story of Henry. A name forged from ambition, a declaration that the child who bore it would rule, at least within his own walls. A name that 8 kings carried to the throne, and millions of ordinary people carried across oceans. It's not a story of description. It's not a story of occupation. It's a story of aspiration, of a parent, more than 1,000 years ago, who looked at their newborn son and said, "This one will lead." Every surname has a story like this. If your name is Henry, or Harris, or Harrison, or Henderson, or any of the names this one became, now you know. You're connected to everyone who ever carried that ancient wish for power, for home, for something worth ruling. And to the kings and patriots and inventors and storytellers who proved the name right. If your name isn't Henry, drop it in the comments. Tell me your surname, because next time, it might be yours. Hit subscribe if you want to know more. New surname stories are coming. I'm Benjamin. This is the name you carry. And this was Henry.